You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode number 43 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. Happy New Year! This is the first episode of the year. This week, I'm happy to share a conversation that I had with a few people from my noon meeting that I talk about on the podcast a lot. I didn't have any specific guests set up for the week, and during one of the meetings this week, I realized how many people have started joining this meeting over the past few months. And in thinking about that, just a number of people have shared how enjoyable they've found the meeting and viewed it as a special place. So I wanted to ask a couple of people who do attend the meeting what they thought about the meeting and how it's impacted their recovery. Yeah, so I was grateful that we were able to have this wonderful conversation. In thinking about meetings, I found a reading in the SAA Green Book on a section called Meetings from the chapter Our Fellowship, and this is on page 12. There's a paragraph in here that I really loved and wanted to share it here at the beginning of this episode. Meetings are places where we can drop our emotional defenses and get honest in a way we are rarely able to experience outside of the fellowship. SAA is one of the few places where we can talk candidly about our sexual behavior without fear of judgment or ridicule. Once we break our self-imposed silence, we are able to be more honest and to form stronger bonds with members of our group. It is these bonds that enrich our recovery process. In time, we learn to trust our fellow members and to receive their trust in us. Yeah, so stumbling across this paragraph, this is just dead on to what we talked about in this conversation. So before getting to the conversation this week, I did want to share that I will be adding an additional recording after that conversation. There were a few people that wanted to join the conversation last night when we recorded, but they weren't able to make it. And just so happens today at our noon meeting during the fellowship that we talked about in our conversation, that I was able to hit record and record more people's thoughts on the noon meeting and about Zoom meetings in particular. There was a question that came up during a fellowship today that I cover right at the beginning of our group conversation. So it was going over the history of the Santa Clara meeting that this was based off of, and the meetings in the Bay Area and how we survived the pandemic by creating Zoom links for each and every one of our in-person meetings. And I can talk more about that at the end of the podcast. The other thing I wanted to mention is I was quite verbose at the beginning of the conversation, kind of setting up the history of the meeting. And so like for the first 5 to 6 minutes or so, it is me talking. And yes, we did have 4 other guests, and everyone does get a chance to weigh in on their thoughts. So just a little upfront that, I did talk a lot right there at the beginning. So without further ado, here is that conversation. Anyway, I wanted to welcome you guys to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. A bunch of first timers on this call, so it's really awesome to have you. This week at our noon meetings, so it's noon for me, I'm on the West Coast, I've been noticing over the past year that the meetings that we've had have been increasing in volume. We started off with about, I'll get into the actual history of the meeting, but for a long time it was kind of averaging right around 40. And towards the end of the last year, 2021, it started ramping up to 50 and then 60. And this week it was, well into the high 70s or low 80s. And so many people on this meeting. I'm just like marveling at what this meeting has become. To give you guys a little background, I've talked about it when I've shared it, some of the meetings over the past year. I'm trying to nail down the date, but I think it was somewhere between 2006 and 2008. A couple of us were at a retreat in the Bay Area and had heard of other people around the Bay Area that had noon meetings, and all of the meetings that I had been going to had been in the evening, 7:30 to 8 o'clock, right around that time frame. And it didn't dawn on us that we could start a meeting at lunchtime. And I work in Silicon Valley, and there are a number of people that work in the same area, and two of us decided to brainstorm and find a location where we could get a meeting started. And it started off in the Alano Club, and there were about 4 of us, and it was really awkward trying to get that meeting started and getting it flowing. It shut down for a while, and we ended up finding a new location. But yeah, for a long while, it was 4, 6, 10, somewhere in that range. And then all of a sudden, it really started to turn around, and more and more people started coming. And eventually, this was a Monday noon meeting. It got to the point where there were about 25, 30 people in the room at lunchtime and we didn't have enough time for everyone to get their shares done. And so we started a Friday meeting at the same location. We were, really grateful that the church that we were in allowed us space for another day of the week. And that meeting, again, started off with probably 6 to 8 people routinely, and then more and more people heard about it and started spilling over. We started a Wednesday meeting, and these 3 meetings have been going for quite a few years. When the pandemic hit, all of the meetings in the Bay Area, we struggled the first week, the first couple of days, trying to set up Zoom links for every single meeting. We've got in the immediate Bay Area, we've got about 60, 65 meetings, and trying to find ways of getting meetings that happen in San Francisco and in the East Bay, that happen at the same time. We needed to get multiple Zoom accounts together. And so the first week, it was kind of awkward trying to figure out which account was going to cover what meetings. And we ended up finding an account to cover the noon meetings. And so we had Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we were showing up, and it's like, well, why not open this up to Tuesday and Thursday? And these 2 meetings did not have terrestrial homes. So we registered those 2 meetings with the ISO, and all of a sudden it became less a small Silicon Valley Bay Area meeting to something that was opened up to the world. And some people started trickling in, and so they were basically coming to Tuesday or coming to Thursday, and then said, well, we still meet on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You guys are welcome to come on over. We were trying to keep it local for a while, and eventually it spilled over, and so we had 5 meetings a week, and which is now spilled over to where we have 7 meetings a week. So it's every day at the same time, same Zoom link, same password. And it's been an amazing thing. The Silicon Valley, Santa Clara meetings have since gone back to in person. So we donated all the Zoom account to this now noon meeting that meets 7 times a week. And it took a while for us to register that all those meetings with the ISO. We count it as 1 meeting. The ISO counts it as 7 meetings. So last month or so, we have all of them registered. And I'm thinking that that's where a lot of people are discovering the meeting. But after I'm done with my history blurb, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. One of the things that I really love is we've been handed down from, I think, the San Francisco groups, this amazing meeting script that works well for keeping the flow of the meeting going. And we carried that over to Zoom, and we've got this way of flow that keeps everything going. And a lot of Zoom meetings I've seen where they seem to stagnate and there's less energy, but the energy in the Zoom room has been absolutely amazing. And more people around the country and around the world. We have gotten people from routinely on from Australia, the UK, Germany, Egypt. Just recently, we used to have a couple guys from South Africa, the Falkland Islands. It's amazing. From Mexico. They're seeing the energy and feeling the energy that's different than other meetings. And I'm this week just filled with gratitude. And I couldn't come up with a subject for, I didn't have an interview lined up for this week and couldn't come up with another subject that I wanted to do on my own. So I really was hoping that I could turn this over to members of our noon group and see what their thoughts on this meeting are. So right now, we currently have 5 of us that are in that meeting, and I will turn it over to you guys. If you're comfortable sharing your name or an alias, let that be known, and what your thoughts on the group have been.
Well, I think I'm going to go first.
Yeah.
My name is Parker.
Hey, Parker.
And I've been coming to the room since February the 7th of last year. I was in a tremendous turmoil in my life, coming out of the death of my wife, coming out of an awful period of COVID in which I had dug myself into the worst hole that I could possibly be in as an addict. And after a serious situation in which I realized this is probably the worst bottom I've ever had, I don't want to go any further into this. And it was either going to mean that I was going to get better, or there was the possibility I wouldn't live. Either I was going to lose my life as a result of those I brought into my space in my life, or out of the difficulty of pain that I was experiencing, that I might end up taking my life. So in February, I made this decision that I was going to take this much more seriously. I had been in the live rooms since July of 19. And as a result of that, and then COVID closing everything down, just kind of drifted away from it. That I was attending some Zoom rooms. But one of the things that I couldn't be in that live room was what we call rigorously honest. And I had a lot of difficulty with that. But when I came into this room in February, I noticed there was something totally different. I was now attending 4 Zoom meetings a day and going all across the platform, trying to find rooms in which I felt comfortable, in a place that I could call home. And one of the things I noticed immediately was the absolute rigorous honesty and the integrity of the men in this room. And they had something that I longed for, something that had eluded me. And the deep, dark secret in all this in my whole life, and the double life that I lived, was, that I was married for 40 years and my wife had passed away, but I was living a double life, acting out with men for almost since I was 14 years old.
Wow.
And I live in the South, and that was very difficult at any point in time. I am now nearly 67 years old, and the result of trying to negotiate that back in the 60s, as opposed to negotiating that now in this time, is vastly different. But what I found here was a place that I began to feel really safe. And by the time March came around, just 4, 5, 6 weeks later, I was finally able to say out loud for the very first time that I was a gay man. I didn't know I was going to say it that day, but I was taking a reading, and I knew exactly what the reading was compelling me to do. And the reason I could do it is because of the safety that I felt in this room. I know that it's a place that I can now share anything about myself. I know the community that I've built with the brothers in this room is, it's the greatest family I've ever been in. If I was going to say I have a family of choice, I have a family of choice of 100 brothers, more or more, as we're looking at this, because there's not one person in this room that doesn't come in that I don't want to get to know as my brother and as part of this family. I don't feel I have to hide anything any longer with this group, and it's been liberating for me. I've been able to now begin to deal with this in my own personal life in person, to begin to come out to people, but it's only because of what happened here and what these men helped me find. And that's what I'm so grateful for. I come here every day because of that reason. And I want to continue to grow. And of course, working on recovery is an everyday thing. You can't put it on the shelf for a day or two or a week or two. I know that I'm going to be working on this the rest of my life. And I plan to have my butt in this chair every day that this room is around, so that I keep going with where I am. My life is so much happier. I'm happier than I've been since I was 14 years old. And that's the importance of what's happened here. The ability, I have a buddy that's in this room right now that I speak to every single day that I met in this room. He lives in California. I live in Louisiana. And we have just a tremendously wonderful relationship that started in this room. And he's one of my check-in partners every single day. So I'm making brothers and friends and family that I never imagined that I could have. And I like to think of it this way. I knew about what it was like to have relations with a man, but I had no concept of what it was like to build a relationship with other men, and the intimacy that could come from that, which was not sexual intimacy, but an intimacy of honesty and integrity. And people like my brother, Steve, who's in the room, is one of the people that first set me out on this journey.
So amazing. Thanks, Parker. And a little bit later, I'll talk about service and the fellowship that we have. Definitely want to cover that. Who else wants to share?
Well, I'll pick up from what Parker was saying, because Parker is a lot of the reason that I'm here. In fact, Parker was the first person I spoke to when I first discovered this room. And to this day, I have no idea how I discovered this room. I've thought about it. My story has a little bit of dovetail with Parker's. 7.5 months ago, I've been married 46 years. As a child, as a later teenager, broken family, living alone with my mother, no goals, no plans, working at an all-night gas station on an industrial highway in Delaware. I was approached by a man who, in a fairly short time, had, I don't know if I want to say groomed, but had invited me into sexual relations, which then became a group of men that I was the center of attention for. and at the age of 17 was being snuck into the local adult bookstores and taught everything there was to know about man's sex from a very dark place. And it was also my first introduction into sex in general. I hid that secret my whole life. My wife didn't know about it. I buried it. And of course, as we all know, you're as sick as your secrets. And while trying to have a normal life and having become a Christian believer around that age, I was so torn inside between what I thought, what I acted, and what I believed, I couldn't sync any of this up. And it all started leaking out sideways. I became an alcoholic. I couldn't keep a job. My wife is an amazing person, comes from an amazing family. And 7.5 months ago, I was blackmailed by a man who I was trying to hook up with on a male dating app. And I knew the jig was up. I knew it couldn't go on. My wife already knew about some things that had happened, but she thought it was all over, that it was all part of my past. And we had been having a lot of trouble up to that point. I knew I couldn't get money out of the bank without her knowing it. And I knew she was on her way home from work, and I waited for her in the garage. And shortly before I knew she'd be pulling in, I cut my wrists. Wow. And she walked through the garage door, and I said, I have something to tell you. And she was able to get the utility knife out of my hands. And I told her exactly what was happening. And the next thing I knew, I was on my way to the emergency room and then a psych ward for 2 weeks. Then drug and alcohol rehab, where I started spilling my guts about my sexual issues and my sex addiction with porn, both men and women, and ended up in a sober living facility in a town about an hour away. And it was while I was at that sober living facility that I got my old laptop back and discovered this room. And I think it may have been the first day or two that I was on that meeting that Parker spoke. And he was so honest. And there was so much integrity in what he said. I reached out to him. I had never done anything like that in my whole life. Never had any real communication with a man. And he made it so safe for me. And he said, this is the place you need to be. You are safe here. And so I started coming regularly. And I not only saw, like Parker was talking about, the integrity and the honesty, I actually began to see all these guys as my heroes. I mean, literally my heroes. And what I mean by that is, oh my gosh, what does it take to be able to talk like that, to be real human beings, to throw off the pretense of manliness and realize that it's not manliness we seek, it's humanness that we seek. And humanness comes from connection in the things that cause us pain, not the victories, yes, victories are important, but not how great we are, but how our weaknesses draw us together and we draw strength from each other. And every day that I come to this room and hear guys speak, I'm just overwhelmed with the fact that I'm in a room of supermen. And I mean that. I know you can laugh, but it's true. And I'm proud. I'm proud to be a part of this group of real human beings who are working together, who can say, I have weaknesses, I have defects, and I'm here because I want to change. And that's one of the hardest things on the planet to do, especially with what we are dealing with. I'm an alcoholic, and I can go out on the street. I can go out on the street out here and say, hey, everybody, my name's Steve, and I'm an alcoholic, and I have 7.5 months clean. And I'll have I'll have strangers walk by me and probably pat me on the back and say, congratulations, I'm so proud of you. Try going out there and say, hey, I'm Steve. I'm a sex addict. I have 7.5 months. Ugh. You're not going to get the same kind of reaction.
Yeah, the stigma.
So for this kind of group to pull together and say, yeah, that's my problem, and help me. And if you help me, I hope that I'm helping you too. That's what being a human being is all about. And that's what my God calls us to. And I'm proud to call each and every one of the men in these rooms my friend, my brother, and my hero. Thanks. I'll stop with that.
Thanks so much, Steve. So we not only do we have Steve on the East Coast, we have Steve on the West Coast, and we also have David here. So either the other Steve or David, if you want to chime in and say anything, go for it.
Yes, I'll go. I guess it's appropriate. Steve after Steve.
Yeah, sure.
I'd have to say, again, I'm here because I made a connection in this room, and about 6 months ago, I was broken, pretty broken. I found out I have a wife and a kid. My wife found out that I was a sex addict, and for the second time, but this time she really found out what was really going on, and I had nowhere to go. I was losing everything. I was afraid of losing my life, losing the career that I built up over the years, the family that I now have. I have a 2-year-old son, and also my wife that I love dearly. And I was so lost, and I did not know or could not understand myself. And I started coming to meetings, and I started hearing stories, and not stories, but actually true events that these fellow brothers were going through. And I was making connections on every story that I heard with things in myself, and realizing that, hey, I'm like that too. Hey, I have that going on too. And it felt so good to hear that I'm not the only one that has these defects, and I'm not the only one that is seeking help. And when I found this room, I got into it for the first time. It was the first time I was video chatting multiple people, myself, showing my face. And at first it was nerve-wracking. And I remember the first time I shared, I just didn't, I felt like I needed to share because I needed to let loose, let go, because I needed to get it off my chest. And it felt so good to hear the acceptance and to be accepted, no matter what I did or how I was feeling, but to bring me up and tell me to keep pushing forward. And because of that, I am where I am now. And I have to say that I've done some work on myself, and I'm happy. I'm happy who I am now, but I wouldn't be that person now if it wasn't for the people in this room that push me to be better. And that's what happens when you go to these meetings, and you go to this particular meeting, is that they push you to be better every single time. And every single story, every single someone opening up and sharing is making a connection. And I keep hearing the word connection. And that's what I think we're all longing for, is a connection. And this room makes that possible. And just happy to be a part of that.
Amen.
Dude, thanks so much, Steve. That's awesome.
So I'll go next. Because it seems like the linear progression of this is slowly getting to less and less amount of time in this group. And so I currently have 12 days of coming to the noon room. Basically, basically at the beginning of the year, it was my goal to hit 300 meetings within the year, because back in October is when my wife found out that I had been talking to other people in like chat rooms and stuff like that, and it was like the third time that she had pretty much suspected that I was a sex addict. And I mean, like so many other people that I've heard in groups and everything, you know, they've tried and they couldn't get out of it. So she had sent me the SAA website with all the meetings and stuff like that. Um, and like I had picked one randomly back in October, and I was like, okay, this is all right. You know, it's, you know, a bunch of guys talking about, you know, what's going on with them. There was a few guys that were talking about how they were in trouble with the law now, and you know, that's what they were talking about. And it was a lot of people talking about the problem of everything and everything. And I was like, all right, well, it was my first experience with anything SAA. So I was like, all right, well, this is what it is. And so I did that, and I worked midnight. So there was a few at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, that when I had off in between work, I would do those. And it was the same thing, you know, a lot of people talking about their problems and, you know, focusing on all the bad things. And, you know, that's where my mindset was. And then the last week of December, I had gone to one of the meetings, and there was just a bunch of people there talking about how the holidays are really hard for them and that they have almost a year and they relapse or they're gonna relapse and they just know it. And here I am with, you know, 3 months under my belt going, well, shit, if these people can't get past Christmas and they've been doing it the entire year, what chance do I have to make it, you know? And so come the new year, I was like, all right, I'm gonna dedicate myself to this. I'm gonna go every single day. Well, not every single day, but at 300 meetings within the year, you know, giving myself a little bit of leeway. And of course, I missed the meeting I was planning on going to, which was, you know, one of the normal telehealth meetings that I had been going to. I was like, well, there goes that. I was like, I guess I gotta find another group. And I saw the noon Zoom room. It was, I've never done a Zoom before like this. So I was like, what the hell? Give it a shot. And like everyone else said in this group, that there was just like a connection. Like I was, you know, like I brought it up and I had my audio off. I had my video off, and I was just listening to everyone share, and something just happened. I was like, all right, I have to share. And if I'm gonna share, I'm gonna do it with the video on. Like I raised my hand up and I turned the video on, and I just shared. And the dynamic of the group was completely different from what I was used to. Like I said, a lot of people were focusing on the problem and this is what it is. Like it almost felt like there was no hope. Like it was going to be a constant battle. And like going into it, like that's what I thought. I was like, it's an addiction. It's a constant battle. It's pushing a 1,000-pound boulder up a steep hill kind of thing. But this room was so different. It wasn't a bunch of people, you know, saying how bad everything is and everything else. It was so much positive energy, and just everyone just was so supportive. And I just clicked. And like I said, I've gone to 12 meetings, and it's literally been 12 every single day. Like I haven't missed a day. And it's not even like, so it's at 3 o'clock my time, which is a whole 2 hours before I would normally get up for like work and stuff. And it's not like before, like if I was like gonna get up and do a meeting, like it was almost like, all right, well now I gotta get up. It felt like a chore. And this, like coming to this meeting, it's less of a chore. It's more like seeing people that, I care about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like even me, like, so like I said, like I have 4 months at this point, and there's new people coming in, and it's like I remember when I was there. Um like it wasn't that long ago. And then there's other people in there that have 5, 10 plus years, and it's like that's where I'm gonna be, you know. And it's like even the people that are like, yeah, I acted out, it's not like I acted out, woe is me. It's I acted out, but I'm gonna get better again, and I'm gonna get back on the track. And and everyone is so supportive of those people. So it just, the dynamic is, it's great. Like, I mean, like Parker said, I mean, we're a family, you know. And I don't think I have ever made this kind of connection with a group of people, because I'm pretty antisocial. I I'm pretty antisocial. Like it's very funny because my occupation is very people driven, but I can't stand people. And for the last 12 days, I can stand you guys, and it's amazing. Like I'll end up rambling for 20 minutes just talking about how great you guys are. So I'll pause there for a minute.
Yeah. Thanks, David. That reminds me so much of my story. Back when I started in November of 2002, the first room that I ever went to, it's about six or so people. And yeah, it was all about the problem, and just week after week, and no wonder why I'm able to, get 3 weeks sober and then slip, is, it's just this constant talk about the problem and not really much about the solution. And I knew that I needed to make a change, and found a different meeting. And that meeting, I know, was started probably a few years before I joined, and they had pulled their program from the San Francisco group, and just the energy was different, and the readings and everything was more solution focused. And so the first meeting that I was in, we ended up trying to reformat that group. And this was right when the Green Book came out and said, hey, we're going to be reading this cover to cover, and we really want to make a change and start focusing on the solution. Some people stuck with us, and some people stuck with the old meeting. And it really helped. But some of the other things that you touched on was it's like all of you have talked about the connections that we have. I think when I was going to one meeting a week, these were people that I saw for an hour of my time during this enormous week. And so it was, just a friendly face. And then I go back to my real life. And the more meetings I started going to, and especially being able to go to a retreat and meet people from around the Bay Area, and then eventually going to an international convention and meeting people around the country, is making these connections with people and getting to know each other. And I think with this meeting in particular, now that we're on 7 days a week, we're there for each other like every day. We see each other. One of the wonderful things that about in-person meetings is we used to have hangouts in the parking lot after the meeting, or in the room, or in the morning meetings, going out for breakfast with each other. And we don't really get that in the Zoom format. A lot of meetings that I go to, as soon as the meeting time is up, the room closes and it's done. And what we've done is allowed for time for questions, time for fellowship after. And just this a couple of days ago, the fellowship went on for 2 hours. So it was essentially like a 3-hour meeting. I'm at work, I'm listening on headphones, I'm present as much as I can be, but the fellowship afterwards has been an amazing thing, where it's not driven by 2-minute shares and sticking to the topic. And topics have ranged all over the place, from some really deep, dark, heavy stuff to just light fucking around with each other, just joking around, or talking about music, talking about sports, and things like that. And it's allowed for these connections. And I think when we started having those connections, it became the energy of the room became much more familial. And so some of the guys that have secretary meetings really have a fantastic personality. Hey, it's up to you. Just calling out different things. And to me, it has set such a different mood for the hour that we're there, or if we hang out for fellowship the next couple of hours. But wanted to talk about the fellowship hour, or the other connections. I know, Parker, you've been critical in your sponsor as well, who I was bummed is not going to be here tonight because of a migraine issue, that being cultivators and making sure that people who haven't had a chance to speak get that little nugget of time after the meeting. Hey, noticed you didn't get to talk. What's going on with you today? And I love that. And so I'll turn it over to you, Parker, then to anyone else here. If you've hung out for fellowship, what that's been like, and then other reflections on the camaraderie, the intimacy, and the connections that we've been able to bond over the past year or two.
Jason, for me, the fellowship actually begins pre-meeting, because I'm a person who, because I am retired, I get into the meetings early, and I love welcoming people into the meetings. I've been taking some responsibility during service roles and with the meeting, and helping out as much as I can there. But I love the newcomers. Because, when I came in February, I was this newcomer with deer in headlights. I didn't know what I was going to find in here. I never tried this in this national sort of Zoom platform. But, from the very beginning, I found a comfort zone there. And this concept of fellowship, in the live rooms, I'd had parking lot meetings, that little extra time, but nothing quite like this, where, sometimes 15, 20 of us are staying in the fellowship. And as we grow, I think the fellowship will continue to grow, but we're able to support one another, to encourage one another. And what I've noticed, that when we talk about the acceptance that's in here, we all have our different proclivities. Every single one of us has a different proclivity, a different challenge in our addiction. But what we have in common is our addiction. And we have that enough so that we have a complete understanding of what it's like. So when a newcomer is coming in, and, we're inviting a newcomer to come into fellowship, I'm hoping they're going to stay. Mm-hmm. Because it's important to get to know people, to be able to help them with questions and give them the support that they need. And I know that when I first came in, I did have that. I sensed that. But I'm trying to take it to another degree with that, because it's my favorite thing to do, is to work with and welcome newcomers in the meeting, and then to journey with them where I can, and through fellowship and through the calls that we make.
Mm-hmm.
Part of our program is to be able to make support calls, to check in with other people, to when you have a challenge, or just to have a connection, a good, healthy connection with someone. And I've got friends that are international friends now that are over to the east of me when I need to reach out that way. And I can, up until midnight, my time, it's early still out there on the West Coast. So I still have plenty of time. So I'm not sleeping much because I'm connecting with people. And I love the connection that I've found in this room. It's truly a family. And Jason, when I came in, I was hiding this other piece because I worked in ministry for almost 30 years. And, I could never have revealed any of this. So the hidden life was a double layer hidden life. But I've been able to share everything here. I call it Zoom anonymity, because you can share something because you think you're never going to meet anybody in this room ever again. You may see them in this one dimension, but I've even had the experience across the Zoom platform that I've actually had sit-down meals with 3 fellows from the Zoom community, because they become that important in my life. They were either coming this way or I was going that way. And I had the opportunity to sit down and have a meal with one of these brothers. And that's a great gift, to have made such friendships that you'll stop along the road, or they will come down and say, "Hey, I'm in town. Can we get together?"
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting here with one of these fellows who, my late wife had one thing left on her bucket list that we didn't get to do, and that was to go to the Grand Canyon. And I'm wanting to go. And one of these fellows in this room has said, "I don't think you should go by yourself. How about I go with you?" And so that's really a bond, and really a connection and a bond that I never, ever anticipated could ever come from recovery, to be able to talk about this, to get past it, and build just a tremendous connection and friendship.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
If I may, starting with what David said, and then tying in with Parker said, David said something that made me think, about the wanting to come to the rooms. The important, these are friends. As many of us know, like I said, I'm in the beverage program, and you often hear the line that a new sponsee says to a sponsor, "How long do I have to go to meetings?" And the sponsor says, "Until you want to go." And that's so true. Is I found pretty early on that yes, I knew I needed to come, but it was not a trial. It was not a sacrifice to come. I wanted to come because I wanted to hear what everybody had to say, because I knew shit. I still know shit, quite frank with you. But every time I learn, first of all, I'm hearing my own experience coming out of the mouths of everybody else. I am not chronically unique. I'm like everybody else. We're all the same picture, just painted with different colors. And when Parker was talking about the meeting after the meeting, the days since New Year's have been really tough for me. Things are much better now. The last 3 days have been much better, but I had a time there that, because I had been stupid in a relationship with my wife, just kind of falling into old thinking, speaking pattern, I had run things back downhill. And not too many days ago, in the meeting after the meeting, I hung on for an hour. And it's not that I had to talk. I just needed to be around you guys. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to be alone. I just didn't want to be alone. And there, I don't know, it was probably a dozen guys on there. And I just needed that fellowship, and it got me through. And so it isn't just the meetings for me. It is that meeting that comes afterwards. And I'm sometimes there for a couple minutes, sometimes longer. Life moves on. You have to do what you have to do in life. But I'm there just because these are my family, fellowship. It's a connection on an internal level. And when I talked about, I was living a life that wasn't my values I wasn't talking about was whether gay or straight or LGBTQ or any of that. The values I'm talking about is honesty, open-mindedness, willingness. And I wasn't living any of those three. And being here, I'm living all three of those values with people who have a lot in common with me and with those who have Zippo in common with me. But what we have in common is our desire to be honest, open-minded, and willing to be healed in the inner person. And so I'll keep coming back, my friends. Thanks.
Brilliant.
I would like to tag on to that because as Steve was mentioning about, the whole idea is like, because of my sexual identity, I've made the decision that I was going to try out some of the LGBTQ rooms and things like that. I didn't know what value there would be to that. And I found some value. But the more important thing that I found is that I'm working on my first step. I'm trying to get this first step ready for a presentation. And I've got a 51-year history of acting out. And the things that I have to share would be far easier for me to share in an LGBTQ room because they would feel and sound normative there. But I want to do it here. This is the place that I found my truth. Mm-hmm. This is the place that I first felt truly, totally accepted. The cameras didn't go off. The phone calls didn't stop. I felt valued and like I truly found a home. And so when I do this first step, which is, like I say, will be painful for me, I'm doing it in this room because I trust the men in this room. Clearly trust the men in this room.
Indeed.
Yeah. One thing that Parker had mentioned was that, you get to know the people in the room a lot better with the fellowship. It's amazing that I think the meeting we had today, we had like 70 something people, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. And so, you get 2 minutes of sharing and these, you don't really get to know everyone, especially when, one thing I absolutely love about our meeting, and I think it's hilarious, is when we all introduce ourselves all at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's just a cluster of words. But I mean, like, just saying that, like, you don't know, that's all it is. I mean, it's just, there's so much going on. So after the fact, like, you talk to people and you get to know them and you learn more about their story and stuff like that. So like recently, kind of like Steve said, like, I've been in the rooms in the fellowship and stuff afterwards, like getting ready for work or even cooking, and I'm just listening and I don't have to say anything. Because the conversation, I mean, it drives itself after the fact. And like you said, you talk about music, you talk about sports, you talk about the hard day you had because of X, Y, and Z, and you just need to let that off your chest, or I've heard other people tell stories of, all the good things that are happening in their life and the changes that, being in SAA and being in this group have happened and allowed them to experience life better because of everything.
Totally. Steve, did you want to mention anything?
Yeah. I'd like to also say, we have 2 minutes to share, and so you try to fit everything in that 2 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
all those feelings, all that anxiety, and you're trying to unload like as fast as you can. And you have like a timeline in your mind. Okay, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about that. But you probably get through like a quarter of it or half of it because you keep rambling.
Time.
But then, yeah, time, and you're like, oh, okay, and so, but then you get to the fellowship, and I think that most of us look forward. I love the meeting. I love the structure. I love all the shares and how we can get through everything and the topics of the day and the readings. But I have to say, I look forward to most of the time the fellowship, because those are when like the true questions can be asked, and you can get answers, and you can get feedback. And I think we're all looking for answers, and we're all trying to figure things out, and being able to have a place to do that and to have a dialogue. And I think the dialogue is one of the most important things, because that's what, at least for me, is the hardest for me, is to talk about feelings, to talk about the struggle, and to be able to openly talk about it and not be worried about judgment, and then being able to either be told like, hey man, you're acting like an idiot, or be like, okay, hey, keep pushing forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that sometimes we need that, at least me, I need that. And I'm glad that I found a place to where can feel comfortable, I can feel safe, and I hope that others and are looking forward to that same feeling. And newcomers, I think that sometimes that they're surprised when they get to the fellowship and they stay. They're like, wait, what? Like, this is something that brings them back, I believe, and keeps bringing them back, because that's where you make those true connections.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. I've mentioned on the podcast before that the original title that we came up with for the podcast was called The Meeting After the Meeting. And for search engine optimization, it wasn't that great of a choice. And my wife suggested Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. And I was like, no, that's too plain and normal and shit that hits everything right on the spot. And so it was a great name for it. But it was based on the conversations that I had at breakfast after a meeting, that I had in the parking lot. And it's like, oh, someone, the real nuggets of information are in these conversations. Hanging out at our retreats, when we have meals together and we sit at a table and we shoot the shit. And sometimes we get into these great conversations, and other times it's just frivolous. And it's all about making connections. And I wanted to capture that, and that's kind of like what we're doing right here. I have recorded I've recorded one of the meeting after the meetings for the noon group, but in order to use that on the podcast, I need to have everyone's permission to be able to do that. I did write down everyone's name, so if I want to use it in the future, I might go back. And that's what I did for episode 1 of the podcast. It was at our retreat. And I had just gotten the recorder and I said, hey guys, I'm messing around with the settings. I'm going to hit record. And there was a bit of that conversation that it's like, oh, this would be perfect for the podcast. And had to go back about a year afterwards and ask, hey, can I use this? And I was grateful that they allowed their voices to be heard. But yeah, just having these free-flowing conversations between sex addicts is an amazing thing. And I'm grateful that we're able to cover that here tonight. One of the things I did want to mention it towards the beginning, and David, you brought it up, was the chaos method of introductions. So in an in-person room, it's really easy to go around the room. It flows pretty quickly. I've been in a room with 60 people, and it just boom, 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 boom. At our retreats, we have like 220 people, and it has gone around the room, and it becomes this mantra that is an amazing thing of energy. But on Zoom, it just becomes a clusterfuck, just trying to figure out who's going to go next, and if the secretary's calling on each person, the list changes and moves around. We've done that with like 20 people, and it's manageable under that. But once you start pushing over 50 people, it becomes crazy. And some meetings opt not to do introductions, and we talked about that at a business meeting, and someone piped up with that it was really important to them that they spoke those words out loud, and to have that ability to deny it for someone could rob them of something. So we decided, let's try this. Everyone just say it at once, and it kind of caught on, and it's become this funny thing. And I like trying to pick up the various voices. There's one person in particular who was going to be here tonight, that was not here, but will be hearing his first step in a couple of weeks. I could always catch his voice because he seems to linger on more than everyone else. And if he doesn't say anything, we're all like waiting for it. And it's like, where was it? Oh, he's not here today. So that kind of brings some frivolity to the meeting, and love that. So we are approaching an hour of recording here. We've got the conversation here tonight has been absolutely amazing. I wanted to allow this opportunity for anyone who wanted to have any closing remarks or things that we didn't bring up. Go for it.
I'm going to start. I just want to say I am a better man than I have ever been because of this group. What they've gifted me with, has been a remarkable sort of thing. I've come to the point where I can accept and love who I am and not be ashamed of it. I am who I am, and God made me this way. Some may not believe that, but I know that God made me this way, and I tried to fight that all of my life. And the men that I've met in this room have given me a gift that I will never be able to express the depth of gratitude to what I truly feel for helping me become real in this world.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll just say that I speak honesty now in a way that surprises me after I say it. I will say something, and while I'm still talking, I'll say, did I actually just say that? It just came out. I didn't even think twice about saying it. Things that I thought I would take to my grave. And as I've said to my wife, and as I've said in this room, and I've said to others, because of this room and this program, I am the best version of Steve I've ever been in my whole life. And I don't ever want to go back, and have no intentions. And I have all the tools, starting with all of you, to keep becoming a better and better version of Steve.
Beautiful. I had to cough there. So anyway, it was fantastic conversation. I thank you guys so much for sharing with us tonight, and look forward to seeing you guys at the noon meeting tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, for making this possible.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I enjoyed that so much. It was really fun to have some people that I see every day on the noon meetings, but they haven't been guests on the podcast yet. So I was really grateful for that. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we did record another section during the fellowship portion of our meeting today. Originally, it was just to record Brandon's thoughts. He was going to make the meeting last night and couldn't. And like so many times in fellowship, the conversation will shift this way and that way. And we started talking about the nature of setting up Zoom meetings around the country and around the world. And we also talked about the ISO and registering meetings, and we diverted into talking about areas and the way meetings are set up in SAA with the International Service Organization. And it was a lot of fun, but it went a lot further out than what I wanted to cover here for this episode. So I did make some edits to that recording. As soon as the recording was done, we did continue to talk for another half an hour or so on various subjects, including sleep apnea, doing stretches. I think we talked about the weather and the amount of snow up in the northern part of the country in Canada. So there's just a lot of stuff going on. So anyway, I wanted to add that little bit here at the end of the podcast. Here that is. Yeah, so we'll use this time right here just to record a little bit. We're actually on the noon meeting itself and the fellowship and the meeting after the meeting. Brandon wanted to be part of the recording last night, but couldn't quite make it. So turn it over to you, Brandon.
Well, you know how things go. Date night kind of takes priority over, making other appointments. But, when it comes to this the podcast itself has been phenomenal. But when it comes to this meeting, it's been very, very inspirational, and it's been very welcomed for myself because of the fact, where I live, it's the closest meeting's like an hour and a half, hour and 45-minute drive. And to be able to have this basically at my fingertips every day, same time, 7 days a week. For me, there's never really the point of, hey, am I going to be able to make the meeting, or is it going to be possible, or just, whatever. If I'm struggling, if I want to be there, if, I know somebody's having a rough day, my brothers in fellowship or, in the program, if I know that something's going on, it's a snap of fingers and I can be there every day, same time. We all know it. And it's legitimately like, it's that rock that you have that you can go to, and somebody's going to be there. And what time that they're going to be there. So very, very grateful. I've met a lot of great people in this program, and I've learned a lot of things. I've seen a lot of recovery from other people, and I've been able to help people out myself. So I appreciate everybody that actually initially made this meeting, and decided, hey, let's do Zoom, and then turn it into the international boom that it has become. Because, when I first came in here, there was only I think the most I had seen in here was like 30, something like that. But still, compared to the very first meeting I went to, the most that was ever in it was like 5. So seeing 30 people in a meeting was great. And now that we're upwards of like 70 and 80 people in a meeting, it's awesome. I love it. Yet again, Jason, thank you for the service you do with doing this podcast.
You're very welcome. Last night we were joking around that during the chaos method of introductions, that a lot of times we can pick out certain voices, and yours is one of them that we definitely hear. It kind of rings out over the rest of them. Both there at the beginning and at the end of the meeting.
Well, let's be honest. As you guys all know, well, anybody in the meeting knows, not necessarily people on the podcast, but as anybody in the meeting knows, I'm normally driving my semi-truck every day while I'm at work doing my meeting, and I have my AirPods in. If anybody knows how well those work with background noise,
yeah, totally.
They work great, but man, do they pick up a lot. So yeah, for there's that, and I technically think I'm like half deaf, so I tend to talk louder and everything else, but it is what it is. But yeah. And then, as a lot of other people know, I like to joke around and be that guy that things out at the last minute just to try to point it out, or be that guy for a second and try to get that laugh.
Yeah, a lot of times your name has been changed either by you or by someone else, some other host in the group, in our fellowship afterwards, where we have fun with each other renaming stuff. And
I won't point my finger at the guy that normally does that. At first, when he first did it, it's like, who did that? And then over time I figured out who was doing it, and then it became one of those things where if he doesn't do it, I think something's wrong with him.
It's kind of an Easter.
So it's like, it's that excitement of the first part of fellowship. It's like, okay, how long is it going to be today before he changes it?
Yeah, a little Easter egg for the end of the meeting.
Guys, I was thinking that you guys have done a great job on this meeting. And it started, I think, in a group out of an idea from Santa Clara group. And wouldn't it be nice if we could have these kind of Zoom meetings on the East Coast or in the Midwest, or where they're primarily based in those areas, and even in other countries. I've been with the ISO for a while, and I mean, they would love that. It would be something that they would, would go right up there on their cherished list. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
So, but it's not easy to do. You got to get people to come. You got to get the word out. I mean, if you're in Chicago or you're in New York, maybe New York would be pretty easy. But maybe the idea of how you did this, and if it could be repeated, Jason. And
yeah, it definitely has. I know there are several pockets around the country that, and around the world, that have done it. But yeah, with the miracle of Zoom, I've gotten to be a speaker at Chicago meetings. Got to a couple of the guys that I interviewed from the UK. They gave me their Zoom credentials. One of them falls on the Tuesday noon meeting here. It's I think at 8 p.m. over in the UK. But so we can travel to different countries and visit different meetings. So there are a lot of them out there. The problem is a lot of them aren't, the information isn't publicly shared. So when I talk about like the Santa Clara meetings, the Bay Area meetings, we have a private list of all our Zoom IDs, so the public can't get to them.
Excuse me, what about putting them in the ISO website?
Some of them are doing that. When the pandemic hit, the plan was to be on Zoom for about a month. And
right.
We're almost 2 years later. And so as some of the meetings are going back to in person, and they also have this Zoom ID. And so when that Zoom ID is left over, they register that as a separate group for the ISO. Whereas some of them, it will still be the same group ID for the ISO. So It's like only one meeting, but there's an in-person meeting and there's a Zoom meeting. But it all falls under the same ID. So
you want to know how I found this group?
Yeah.
This is my first time, and I found this group by going to find a meeting in the SAA website.
Yeah, there's
ISO website, right?
Yeah, there's another meeting that I'm a part of that has gotten a lot bigger, and it's still affiliated with its physical location.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as trusted servant on a daily basis, because it's two times a day daily, and upwards of 40 people a meeting, depending on the day and the time. But the trusted servants that run it now, I think there's only like one or two that are still physically located in Arizona.
Yeah.
And everybody else is other places in the nation and whatnot. And that one's listed on the ISO website, and it keeps growing and growing too. And I think it's the stability, the fact that it's there 7 days a week, 2 times a day, specific times, and
exactly
when it works for people at those times. And that's why I go to that one,
Mm-hmm.
And it's an open mix and closed. It depends on the day. Some days are open, some days are closed, but it's a mixed meeting all the time. So it doesn't work for everybody. And like, I get something different here at this men's only meeting that I don't get at that meeting, but I get stuff from my female fellows there that I don't get here. And then I also go to an LGBTQ that's on 2 times a week. I can't always make that one because it's on my work nights, but that one keeps growing too. And again, I get something completely different from that meeting.
Were there 70 people there today, participants?
Yeah.
This one, wow. There was 80 some, 2 days ago? There was
84 a couple days ago.
Yeah.
84. Hey guys, I'm gonna have to edit this severely for the. We just wanted to do just a couple of minutes of the fellowship here.
Hey Jason, real quick, I want to throw something in for you to add in there.
Yeah.
To kind of add to like the topic of we were talking about changing names. Something else that I noticed in here is like one of our favorite people that's in here, who is actually the host of the meeting right now, got changed to Parker ... LOL.
Yes. There's a good
one individual from Arizona got changed to his name and at the IHOP of meetings. One of our members from Alberta got changed to Alberta warmed up to melting Canada. So, I mean, there is all kinds of different things that we joke around and stuff like that. But like, there's one person in here, he's had this since the start of the meeting, and I love it. And after his name, it says attitude of gratitude, and that is absolutely stellar. I love it.
Attitude adjustment would be good too.
All right, well, I'm going to wrap that up, and I will tack this on to the end of the recording from what we did last night. And thank you guys, and then we'll after I do that, we'll leave the room open for more fellowship. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
So yeah, like Brandon had said, here at the end, with all the goofiness that we do, changing names and just having fun with each other, it's been an amazing bonding experience. And speaking of Brandon, he will be doing his first step at one of the noon meetings in the next week, and we will be recording that for a future episode of the podcast. So look forward to that. I haven't received a lot of new emails. I've been getting a lot of praise and stuff at the meetings that I go to, but I don't have anything right in front of me that I can read. So if you do want to provide any feedback for the podcast, something to be read on the podcast, you can email us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. And if you want to be a guest on the episode or want to get a hold of me, you can reach me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. I'm so grateful for all the guests that have been on this episode in particular. Big shout out to my noon groups and all the people that make that possible. Much gratitude, as always, for all the listeners of the podcast. I thank you so much for listening to this one. And as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.